I just watched more than 3 hours of NIO's Innovation Day, so that was a very long presentation, given all in Chinese. The various NIO people have been on stage, including Ni Bin. But in this video, I will not give you the detailed run through and everything they said, and not give all of the product specifics and so on. Instead, what I want to do here as an automotive consultant, on the one hand, help understand what this means for the automotive industry, and second, from a NIO perspective, investor's perspective, what this ultimately means for the company and an investment. So I'll start off with the first bit, which was about the NIO chip. So this is about an Incar chip that is going to replace the NVIDIA Orin that NIO is currently using in its supercomputer Atom. And what is the interesting fact here, or the news today, that they've been brought this chip with him on stage and said that the company completed this successful tape-out phase. So that's the end of the design phase of the chip. So meaning we are very close to the actual mass production of the chips. And so it seems like they are in time for the NT 3.0 platform and the NIO ET9, which will feature this chip for the first time. And so that's kind of the update. I mean, there was lots of stuff in this presentation today which was not entirely new. So we heard about the chip before, but now giving a little bit more detail here, for example, also bringing some highlights of how this chip, for example, improves the image processing. So this is an important piece here. It's an Incar chip. So this is not one of those data warehouses chips, or the chips that's used to train the neural networks, or that you see in AI applications, for example, training the large language models. No, this is the chip that sits within the car. And so this is also the significance for investors here. The fact that they bring their own developed tech within the car is leading, in this example here, to a better performance. So you can see there's much more detail in the images that are getting processed for functionalities like auto braking, but also autonomous driving features and stuff like that. And possibly it's doing that at a faster pace, at a lower energy usage and stuff like that. I mean, there will be benchmarks in the future for that, for sure. But the significance, I think, for the investors will be that this will ultimately save cost for NIO once this is at full production scale. And most importantly, it will make NIO independent from third-party providers such as NVIDIA. Yes, they might still be dependent on the companies who are actually producing those chips. And I think that might be either something, a company locally. I think that would be the preferred way to go. The fact that it's a 5nm chip helps us to guess that it might be at the forefront of what China will be doing next. So Huawei and some other major companies are already experimenting with this kind of advanced production techniques. And so I think the number one go-to play would be a Chinese company if it's feasible and possible. That's kind of secretive, I guess. Otherwise, I would guess they would go to Samsung, which does 5nm technology. I'm not sure if they go to any Taiwanese manufacturers, because I think they have too much influence by the US. And I mean, what does it mean for investors? NIO is now becoming self-sufficient, so they could not get cut off at any point if the US administration is suddenly waking up and thinks like, well, let's prevent these Chinese car manufacturers to even having the in-car chips, which is currently not the case. And you can just buy them from NVIDIA, but they decided to become self-sufficient. Plus those advancements in performance, the advancements on the cost side, and most likely also with what I'm going to talk about in a couple of seconds, it will be a better hardware-software integration. So that's the news today here. Then NIO today presented a 4-year-long R&D vertical integration project, or rather the outcomes of that. So this is about really the fact that I just mentioned, that a better software and hardware integration should be the aim of NIO. So you can see here in this timeline, they pointed out how in the past automotive industry mostly used AutoSAR actually, so that's driven by the Germans actually, like Volkswagen, BMW, and so on, our partners, and the whole supplier ecosystem, which is producing all of these different chips and, for example, battery management systems, ECUs, and so on. All of that has been kind of compiled or managed through the software that is in this consortium, and this has not been living up to the expectations recently, especially with these companies that are now really driving the innovation currently, like NIO, but also like Tesla, for example, who's rather going with some of these newer systems, also building their own kernels and software, but still depending on software like Linux or Linux kernels or Android kernels in some instances, depending on which OEM you're looking into. But basically, that's been the old era, and now NIO starts the new era and basically saying, look, we are now in the AI era, and this means there will be new requirements towards software and hardware, and basically we want to create a whole backend for it. So we want to be able to have our own developed hardware here with, for example, the chips that I just explained here. They still mention the Orin hardware, but also the NIO box is definitely self-developed, and they are managing different vehicle functions. And with this new software layers that they're now putting on top, which are self-developed and I guess coded entirely only on purpose for making this possible here, this ecosystem, they are now announcing those different software layers which are managing different parts of the vehicle experience and the technology behind it, and accessing it's the intersection between hardware and software in this instance. And they are pointing out here how this is cut off here a little bit. Let me zoom out a bit. That this software is now, SkyOS is now more advanced than, for example, Linux-based systems, 20x or 100x in improvements in performance. They had various examples how the latency is better, the connectivity is better, and so on. And now it seems that this software is ready and that they will be able to launch it. What's important and interesting here is, of course, that this software seems to be not only for NIO, but might actually be distributed into the whole automotive industry. So at some point, NIO may actually become a competitor to this industry consortium here, AutoSAR, and we'll see whether or not at least Chinese makers will adopt some of their software suits here that they have developed now, but definitely NIO will. And that again makes them more vertically integrated, so that's going to be more efficient and also benefit the users with a better user experience and more performance, but also on the company level, right? This will ultimately lead to cost efficiencies, to faster development cycles, to be less dependent on others, and with the potential to sell this as a service and as a product to others as well. Then I found this one quite interesting as a news bit here, which is this CarCentric open platform. So that tells us that this is again open to others. That's, I think, one thing that makes NIO unique from some of the other startups and OEM that we see out there. For example, in contrast to Tesla, NIO is more like going out and making platforms open and doesn't have this winner-takes-all approach. Instead, as you see with the partnerships for battery swapping and so on, they're trying to do a more collaborative approach, while Tesla is doing it in some areas like opening patents or opening the charging networks as well. However, they are more, trying to get the whole industry. If you read some of their plans, like we want to sell 20 to 30 million cars annually, which would effectively be 1/3 of the market, right? And so NIO here with this CarCentric open platform, in my understanding, is trying to do something here that is kind of an in-between of Tencent and Adobe, like creating an open web ecosystem and making native experiences possible in the car. So that means apps that are running natively, that are designed for the car, and that are similar to what we know from the Tencent and WeChat ecosystem mini programs. So the fact that they say that this is open tells me that NIO trying to create an industry standard here. I would put a question mark in here on how successful this can be. This could just be ignored by others, because basically I think currently everybody else is still trying to do the same. But the fact is that NIO has done it now and is saying, look, guys, it's open. You can also access our apps, and you just need to use this, the background, the software, and so on. And we're happy to help with that. And you can build on that. And maybe we become the car ecosystem and OS in the future. And that will take a lot more time to convince others. And it needs to be good also, and compete with the likes of Xiaomi and Huawei. Whether or not that will be possible, I think is up to be seen, but at least they're trying, right? So it's a very, very big vision, and it's kind of it's even beyond an app store. It's more trying to, if you with this SkyOS and replacing AutoSAR with the whole point between hardware to software here, and now also the App Store type of functionalities here, trying to open that up and creating the operating system for a whole industry here is quite a big shot, in my opinion. So question marks on how much adoption this will get from others in the industry. Basically, I see that towards the end of the consolidation that we're currently in. Now, what else? This one was quite interesting. I think there's so much in there that I actually have to make a separate video about that. But NIO announced this or went more into detail of its NIO World model. What is this? It's basically the NIO approach to something like the an AI platform. So it's, well, let's jump into some screenshots here. So this is Ren Xiaoqing, who, by the way, is kind of the inventor of ResNet, along with a couple of other colleagues, where he was, the most important part of actually inventing the technology like image labeling that we've seen also being used mostly between 2010 and 2020, where basically, for example, Tesla, Carpathy, who was using that, using the images that the car is providing and using computers to find patterns, to label them automatically, like what's a car, what's a tree, what's a road, and so on, in order to understand what's happening in the picture, actually. And that became much more sophisticated over time, and now also we see the latest renderings, which are getting more 3D, and we have the LiDAR sensor input on top of that, right? And what NIO is trying to achieve here is basically create a whole new world that is, in a sense, artificial, but it's based on the input of the training data. Meaning, so on the very right-hand side, you see this image is not, it's looking like it's video, but it's actually generated by computers, generated by this NIO World model, because the idea here is basically that, think that the example that Ren Xiaoqing used was that if you close your eyes and you think of trees, everybody got a picture of trees in your head, and whether they are white in the winter or they're losing their leaves or green, they all look different, right? But these are different realities and options. And he said what's missing in the current vision-based end-to-end approaches, which, for example, Tesla is doing, these are the approaches where you use cameras only, and you try to understand what's happening in front of you, and the computer can decide based on the algorithms to take the roads on their own, right? So that's the current state of the full self-driving approach in an end-to-end manner that Tesla is pursuing. But what NIO wants to do here on top is that actually to invent a model that's not only analyzing what's happening, what the cameras are viewing, so not only what you can see, but actually what you can imagine, or what you can, they mentioned it here, they said, reconstruction and reasoning. So because your brain also can do that, the brain can actually think of stuff that is not actually there. Similar to that, they want to create this AI model that is able, similar to OpenAI's Sora, to create worlds and create options, meaning create those artificial paths and roads and scenes and driving patterns that are, that have different options for each of the milliseconds that are happening. And with that, making artificial autonomous driving based on artificial intelligence more safe and more advanced. So it's really worth a separate video to dive more into what they have presented today. But this was some nice added commentary around what they are doing here in this regard. And then ultimately, last but not least, an update to the NIO phone, which is more beautiful, more advanced, new functionalities, better integrated. Already the second iteration of the NIO phone. So we'll see now that they have now, despite the fact they have downsized the team already, they are able to upgrade it with better chips. Maybe now they let me actually test it this time. Maybe they're now proud enough to let me make a video about the NIO phone. Otherwise, I still need to get my hands on the second generation on my own again. But, the fact is, they are already bringing out a update to the NIO phone. It's going to be, also sold on different channels now. So it seems like Jingdong, JD.com, it seems like they are, broadening the scope for the user base. They have now had their learnings. They have now more acceptance by the users. And it's becoming a thing, right? I think in the end, all of that is about creating the NIO ecosystem based on user experience, the software, the hardware, and integrating everything else. So it's kind of an update that we've seen this time from NIO that is not telling us entirely new things, but much more progress this time. And as I mentioned, it's been a 3 hours presentation, so it was very, very detailed. Like some of the stuff, I think even too detailed, like with all of these images that they had, or presentation slides and so on. So some of that I think was even too technical to digest for some people, but you really get this sense of how big the vision is for NIO that they're doing, and how they have invested in R&D really strongly in the past, and how they're now starting to yield those results. So next year, I think we will see lots of that on the road with the ET9, and then trickling down into all of the NIO models. And this obviously will also extend its scope to at least the sub-brands, but maybe, as we can see now, also maybe with this collaborative approach that NIO is using here, into other brands, maybe the NIO battery swapping partnerships first, but also I think the goal here seems to be that they want to provide a whole software hardware ecosystem that could go it could go into other OEMs toolbox and pave the way for a new Chinese automotive industry that is led by NIO. It's as big as this, right? And you have to be really you really have to give them credit for the fact how much work they've put into there. So I think if you want to take a negative view on that, you might want to say, is that already necessary, and how high are the odds for success for pulling off something like that as a startup, as a small company? But I think I've shown you some of the benefits that this has on paper, and now it's about how much they can bring on the road, and we'll see that hopefully at some point in the financial metrics. And so this is what you need to know if you're working in the automotive industry, because this is what we will see. NIO, Huawei, Xiaomi, as these sorts of ecosystems and the tech which they bring into there, revolutionizing even the basis from the hardware, from the EV skateboard, the platform, up to the software. And then on top of that, what this might mean as the investment case, the business case for NIO ultimately, when all of this R&D stuff is worked through and they will yield the results in terms of profits from that. I think it's quite interesting. Hasn't been entirely new this time, but much more detail. And it's interesting to follow along. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.